What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with 444, and we are talking players to cut for week 14. It's that time of year where wins are critical. We gotta get wins to get into the playoffs, and if you need a win right now, you might have to make some difficult choices with your roster. I'm gonna give you players that you can cut right now to make room for win now options. Before we get started, remember to like this video and subscribe. And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 444.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. And exclusively for our YouTube audience, use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%. Now let's go ahead and dive right in with our first player, Miles Sanders. I was willing to hold on to Miles Sanders because it seemed possible that he could earn his job back. But after week 13, the outlook is very bleak. In week 13, Sanders had 8 carries for 23 yards and 1 reception for 6 yards. Chuba Hubbard had a dominating 25 carries for 104 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. It was absolute domination in what should have been a difficult matchup against the Tampa Bay run defense. And this is 2 straight weeks in a row where Sanders has had less than 40% of snaps compared to Chuba Hubbard over 60%. Sanders hasn't exceeded 9 fantasy points in PPR since week 3. He only has one other double-digit fantasy performance this year. It was in week 1 with 11.8 fantasy points. And while Carolina's coaching staff isn't analyzing fantasy points like we are, they're certainly analyzing statistics and coming to the same conclusions that we are. Sanders is just straight up less productive than Chuba Hubbard. At this point, he's a handcuff that sees a decent amount of carries and a bad offense. You will never feel comfortable with Sanders in your starting lineup. Moving on to the next player, this one pains me. I was a big Jahan Dotson stan heading into the season, and I'm very pro Sam Howell. But unfortunately, these two things just don't coexist very well. And technically, it could be more related to Eric Bieniemy bringing that Kansas City concept of spreading the ball around the receiving core. But regardless of whether it is Howell or Bieniemy driving the issue, nearly every pass catcher in this offense is wildly inconsistent. But what makes Dotson the drop candidate here is that Dotson's inconsistency is kind of easy to predict. Dotson's fantasy points spike when Curtis Samuel is out or limited. Dotson's best 2 performances of the year came in weeks 8 and 9, where he had 24.8 fantasy points and 16.9 fantasy points with a touchdown in each game. Those happened to be 2 games where Curtis Samuel was injured. Samuel also got dinged up in week 11 and played just 16% of snaps. Dotson had a touchdown there. In fact, 3 of Dotson's 4 touchdowns that he's had this season have come in games where Samuel was injured. To make matters worse, Dotson has a week 14 bye, so we can't play him this week, and 2 of his fantasy playoff matchups are just flat out awful. You're not starting him against the Jets, probably not against San Francisco. There is literally only 1 game left in the fantasy season where you could potentially start him. There is no real reason to roster Dotson at this point. Drop him for a high upside handcuff. Moving on to the next player, here's another player that I hate recommending as a drop, but we gotta do it. I would love to hold on to Josh Downs for what he has the potential to be. But unfortunately, since his week 9 injury, Downs has come back to reality, and this just might be what we can expect from him through the remainder of the season. Since week 9, Downs has failed to reach double-digit fantasy points, and over the past 2 weeks, his snap count has been slightly down from where we were seeing him earlier in his hot streak. Alec Pierce has seen an increase in target share, and Michael Pittman is absolutely dealing as the clear and unquestioned wide receiver 1 of this team. I could advocate for keeping Downs if we were earlier in the season, but the big issue here is that we are down to just 2 teams on a bye week, and then all teams are full go. That means that streaming options at wide receiver are just less valuable. Unless you're in a deep league, Downs is going to offer you very little value here. And moving on to our last player, Baker Mayfield had a very tough week 13, but I expected that. Carolina's pass defense is legit and has held quarterback after quarterback to subpar games. Even Dak Prescott struggled against Carolina. So I had 0 expectations that Baker would have a good game here. That's not the issue. Baker's season has been up and down. He's been an overall fine streaming option to get you through bye week issues and injuries. But again, we're down to just 2 teams on a bye week, so the need for a guy like Baker just isn't there. You don't need a steady streamer if you're at this point here where you're still planning to stream quarterbacks. You need high upside streamers and good matchups. For example, I also do a Beat the Waiver Wire video here on 444, and last week I told you to stash Jake Browning because he could have a strong week 13 performance and become a strong streaming option. Boom, there you go, it happened. Before that, my recommendation was to stash Gardner Minshew. Good matchups. Boom potential. Happened. I would look at both of those players like that before turning to Baker Mayfield. Baker faces Atlanta this week. This is another tough matchup. And in their last matchup, he threw just one touchdown and one interception, and the day was saved by decent rushing yardage, but it still wasn't anything spectacular, not a week winning performance. After that, he faces Green Bay, another difficult matchup through the air. Week 16 is a good streaming game for him, but are we really holding on to Baker through 2 games for one deep playoff matchup? No. Drop Baker. Win now. And that wraps things up. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and comment below. And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 4for4.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. And exclusively for our YouTube audience, use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%.